Lewis Carroll, photographer. The Princeton University Library Albums by Roger Taylor and Edward Wakeling. Published 2002. Introduction by Peter C. Bunnell. This book marks the first comprehensive publication of the 407 photographs by Charles Lutwidge Dodgson, more familiarly known to his generation of admirers as Lewis Carroll, in the collection of the Princeton University Library. It is the largest collection of Dodgson's photographs anywhere, and this book offers the most extensive discussion and documentation of his pictures ever published. Though long known and appreciated by scholars, and, in the case of certain famous images, by devotees of Carroll, these photographs have never before been available to be studied altogether. Roger Taylor and Edward Wakeling have written the texts that follow, and no two authorities are more knowledgeable about Dodgson's photographic endeavors. The fact that Princeton has brought these major scholars together to create this book reflects the significance of its holdings and its commitment to making them better known. Roger Taylor, a British photographic historian and leading expert on the Victorian period, has written a book-length essay that addresses Dodgson's considerable body of photographs. In addition to surveying his photographic output and placing it into the context of his life and other work, Taylor presents new thinking and new evidence about Victorian image-making in general, about Dodgson's photographic contemporaries, from Julia Margaret Cameron to Oscar Gustav Rejlander, and about the practice of amateur, artistic, and commercial photography during the 25 years, 1856 to 1880, of Dodgson's enthusiastic involvement with the medium. Taylor also vividly narrates Dodgson's struggles to master the complicated devices and demanding techniques of 19th century photographic science and art. Dodgson's taking up of photography, the course of his learning with and from his friend Reginald Southey, his mastery of glass plate negatives and albumen prints are all reported here, with new facts and exceptional insight into exactly why photography became so central to Dodgson's life. The fact that he was both a member of one particular level of society and an aspirant to another, and the new understanding of how he used photography to negotiate from one level to another, illuminates a life spent in some struggle for identity. Taylor casts light on the intricacies of class and achievement, of the individual and the family, and on how Dodgson's intelligence enabled him to emotionally master and come to terms with his complicated world. Because the content of Dodgson's pictures provides a guide to his navigation through society, we must turn to Edward Wakeling for help in identifying his subjects and positioning his sitters within the environment they shared with Dodgson. A British Carroll scholar and former chairman of the Lewis Carroll Society, Wakeling has devoted years to the study of Dodgson's milieu. He has prepared the illustrated catalogue of the entire Princeton collection, providing detailed captions that describe the various subjects and identify the sitters, including their professions and family ancestries, as well as their connections to Dodgson and to Victorian society. Wakeling's contributions, together with Taylor's exposition, take us far beyond the hitherto simplistic notion of Dodgson's infatuation with children to reveal the complete and true autobiography that he has left us in these pictures. Among the most creative of Dodgson's photographic accomplishments are the albums of images he assembled. He created these for essentially three different purposes: show albums that he could exhibit to visitors and prospective sitters, albums that contained family portraits and photographs of close acquaintances, and finally, gift albums for friends. Princeton has 4 of Dodgson's albums, and the photographs in them are reproduced in the catalog in album order, so that for the first time a reader without access to the originals will be able to experience the careful sequencing of photographs that is unique to each album, and that reflects Dodson's own intent for how these images should be seen. In addition, Wakeling has painstakingly analyzed the artist's meticulous numbering system and undertaken his own extensive research to conduct a chronological register of all the photographs, not just those at Princeton, that Dodson is known to have made throughout his life. This list is unique and should become a basic reference tool for study of all Dodson's photography. Until Wakeling constructed this invaluable register, the chronology of Dodson's photographs was poorly understood and often misconstrued. By establishing the sequence of photographs, as well as through his detailed and thorough understanding of all things Carrollian, Wakeling provides an essential underpinning for this publication and for all future scholarship. Building on this firm new foundation, Taylor has been able to write with conviction and authority about Dodson's ambitions and development as a photographic artist. Together, these authors worked their way through the myriad issues confronting them both, sharing information and ideas in a fruitful collaboration. Throughout their exchange, they have resisted speculation, instead basing their claims only on the evidence found in Dodson's pictures, letters, and diary entries, evidence that some of their predecessors may not have had access to, and that others may have chosen to ignore because it contradicted their theories or preconceptions. That a highly educated and sophisticated man like Charles Lutwidge Dodson, or a remarkably imaginative writer named Lewis Carroll, would have had such a fascination with photography should not surprise us. In mid-19th century Britain, the photographic image was thought to border on the miraculous, and it required a very special ability to interpret what it revealed. Experience played a considerable role in deciphering photography, as it did in decoding the aspects of Victorian society that exerted an equally strong fascination for Dodson's restless intelligence and irrepressible humor. As evident in his now famous Tales of Alice, what Dodson most desired was a world that made sense, and in terms of pictures, a world that would be what he called a perfect likeness. For Dodson, with his penchant for endeavors of the mind and the imagination, of language and of numbers, photography was one more complex realm to explore and conquer. Dodson wrote only briefly about the ideas behind photography, though he did make a characteristic remark that it was a stupendous addition to the powers of science. Not surprising, given his interests in logic and mathematics. We can better appreciate the prevailing contemporary view of the medium by quoting another writer, A. Bisbee, who said of photography, quote, "It acts with a certainty and extent to which the powers of human faculties are perfectly incompetent. Not only does it delineate every object presented to its operation with perfection in proportions, perspective, and tint, but it delineates objects which the visual organs of man would overlook or might not be able to perceive with the same particularity, with the same nicety, that it depicts the most prominent feature, and thus may scenes of the deepest interest be transcribed and conveyed to posterity, not as they appear to the imagination of the poet or painter, but as they actually are." End quote. In such real-life scenes, as in Dodson's imaginary ones, he was in search of the ways we disclose ourselves to others. In his hands, the camera became a tool for fixing the revelation of personality. The camera was understood to reveal more than the eye could see, and it gave Dodson the instrument he needed to delve beneath surfaces into places of the deepest personality and privacy, his goal even in face-to-face relationships. And just as language was a subject of Dodson's writing, so photographs, too, were a way for him to gain insight into how the world looked and to what extent the world really was what it appeared to be. He saw that a photograph was ultimately a closed world, bound by its frame, a self-contained story, like his literary works, that begins and ends. There are Dodgson photographs and negatives in several other public and private collections around the world. The most significant holding, after Princeton's, is that of the Helmut Gernsheim collection in the Harry Ransom Humanities Research Center at the University of Texas at Austin, with over 300 images, including 4 of Dodgson's own carefully constructed albums. Another collection, including 1 major album, was formerly on deposit at Christ Church, Oxford. Originally the property of Alice Liddell, who inspired the Alice Tales, and her family, it was auctioned in London in June 2001 and purchased by a private collector who has put the pictures on display at Christ Church. Other institutions with significant holdings of individual prints and negatives include the Alfred C. Barrell Collection, Fales Library, New York University, 54 works, National Museum of Photography, Film and Television, Bradford, 44, National Portrait Gallery, London, 30, Musée d'Orsay, Paris, 27, the Rosenbach Foundation, Philadelphia, 21, the Pierpont Morgan Library, New York, 17, and the Royal Photographic Society, Bath, 13. Wakeling reports that after Dodgson's death in 1898, the sale of his effects mentions some 34 albums. Some of these have since been lost and others broken up. We can now account for perhaps only 1/3 of them. Princeton has albums that cover the significant early years of Dodgson's photography, up to the point when he began in 1863 to use a studio in Oxford. Princeton also has an extensive collection of photographs from the later Christ Church studio period, beginning in 1872, both in the Parish collection, which includes the Henry Holiday album from that period, and in the library's other holdings of individual prints acquired over several years. It is clear that the 6 years between 1857 and 1862 were the most active period of Dodgson's photographic career. By this time, he had established his photographic style by exploring a range of subjects before settling more consistently on child portraiture. Albums A1 and A2 in the Princeton collection cover Dodgson's formative years and contain the most diverse subject matter of any of his albums. In addition to portraits, they encompass landscapes, still lifes, anatomical specimens, and narrative tableaus. The later albums, found elsewhere, lack some of the creative spark that fired the first 7 years of Dodgson's work. The exception to this observation is album A6 in the Gernsheim collection at the University of Texas. Unlike others in his A series, this is a small and intimate album, most likely his first and perhaps intended only to be seen by the Dodgson family and close friends. This album reveals just how quickly Dodgson was able to grasp and master the complexities of the process, as well as compose exceptionally elegant images that markedly display his stylistic identity. At this point, the introduction gives a detailed account of how Parrish acquired the photographs he did, which I'm going to skip. In considering Dodgson's photographs, we must avoid the temptation to see merely the who, where, and when. Dodgson purposefully chose notable men, women, and children to be his subjects, but the historical content of their depictions is not the reason to value his work. Nor should these photographs invite consideration only because of who made them. If this were all there was to it, Dodgson's work in photography would be no more than a curiosity. What has to be seen is the triumphant way he absorbed the medium into his larger conception of being, and made its qualities manifest in terms of his own knowledge and deep emotional interpretation. W. H. Auden, who admired Lewis Carroll, and wrote about his work, said it this way, quote, "The first criterion of success in any human activity, the necessary preliminary, whether to scientific discovery or to artistic vision, is intensity of attention, or less pompously, love." End quote. No, it is not Dodgson's subjects that are important. What is important is the way he created a photograph, making its pictorial space an arena for interaction between ourselves and those depicted. In other words, it is his genius as a picture maker that must be appreciated. Lewis Carroll's writing has been read and cherished by generation upon generation. Charles Lutwidge Dodgson's photographs can now be seen to warrant a similar admiration and equal affection. It is hoped that this book will, as never before, capture and reveal the real looking-glass world that he created. Thank you for listening.